and it's just the craft isn't there, or they don't know what an idea is. They think an execution is an idea. That is the number one most common thing we run into is somebody goes, I have a great idea, and then they show me an ad. I'm like, that's not an idea. That's your execution of an idea. What's the idea that led you to that ad, right? Well, it's the ad right here. You can see it. I'm like, no, that's a headline with some art on it. I get it. That is the execution of said idea. But the idea is much bigger. The idea has to be something that can, I don't know, give birth to many, many ads and not just print. It could be print TV. It could be a stunt. It could be, I don't know, a cologne, right? So that's kind of the reason why I got into it. And I think that it's the thing that we teach the most is idea generation, right? Just pure, how do you invent from nothing? And it seems like the most daunting task in the world, but it's still enlightening to them when they haven't heard it, which is, you know, every idea starts with an insight. It's not new news to those of us who do this for a living, but to them it is, right? So that's the big mistake they make. Is that like, I have an idea. I'm like, you don't have an idea unless it came from a human truth first. So who am I talking to? What do they care about? All that stuff comes in the brief, all right? That doesn't give you the idea. Is you know, the truth about the world gives you the idea.
Hello, I'm Mike Ryan. I'm the Chief Networking Officer at PIMS, and welcome to our second season of Minutes with Mike. Now in my 33rd year at PIMS, I've had the privilege of partnering with companies both large and small, supporting their PR and marketing through customized fulfillment and distribution that delivers measurable impact on their brand perception, boosts positive affinity, and fuels their overall brand performance. And throughout my career, I've had the chance to work alongside many talented folks. This is their story. On this show, we'll sit down with some of the world's top marketing and business thought leaders to learn more about their success, how they got there, how marketing helped them achieve their goals, what strategies they used, and what inspires them. Please join me on this journey as we learn from those who are changing the way we think about business. So sit back, enjoy. You're listening to Minutes with Mike.
Buddy, to the latest episode of Minutes with Mike, and it means twofold. It's me and Mike Rovner today. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Minutes with Mike's.
Minutes with Mike's. There you go. Mike and I have we've been buddies now for, I hate to say this out loud, Mike, but I think it's 30 years.
Ooh, at least. I think it's over 30.
Well, let me back up a little bit. Mike is a partner at the ad agency Tiny. He's also an adjunct professor and has got a lot going on. So when I was thinking about some of the OGs of people that I worked with for my entire career, there was a group of about 10 people that came up in my head, and he was obviously one of them. I first met Mike. He was working at a PR agency. Now, back in the day, PIMS, as everybody who's watching this comes to know it, PIMS was a fulfillment and distribution house for press release distribution, right? Back then, late 80s, early 90s, PR was, these folks were writing these 2 or 3 page press releases. They were sending it out to the media, right? It was TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, the media. And then would have guys like Rovner behind a phone. They would call these people to build relationships and get their press release about whatever it is they're pushing on air or in print. So, well, there was a company called GTFH, Gross Towns. I'm going to get this wrong. Gross Townsend Hoffman.
Frank Hoffman.
Frank Hoffman.
Frank Hoffman, which was actually part of the Gray Healthcare Group.
The Gray Healthcare Group. And they were a great client of PIMS in more ways than one, because not only did they do a lot of work with us, but they were right down the road. And back then, I would just literally almost every day just wander up to their offices and walk from cubicle to cubicle and say hi. So, Mike, tell us how that all started with you. How did you come to be in that world?
Well, I graduated from the University of Iowa. I grew up in New York, so I was always coming back to New York. But I graduated from the University of Iowa with an English degree. And from what I understood, the choices I had were become a teacher or get into advertising. I don't know why those were the only 2 choices I had, right? But that's what I had in my head. But the only job I could get was working for, at the time, it was called the November Company, which was the Bush Quail. That's how old I am. 92
Jeez.
re-election campaign. I was not a political creature. I was just a guy looking for a job in advertising, and I was basically a paid intern in both the creative and the account management department. So I was learning, everything I could. I was soaking it all up. Granted, it was for a political campaign and for one that had a lifespan, right? Like it was over no matter what. Even if he won or lost, it would be over by the time the election was over. But I learned creative and I learned account management a little bit. When it was over, I knew I wanted to continue the career, but I there were no ad agencies that were just hiring kids off the street with just one, few months of experience working on a political campaign. I have to back up. The first job I could find was a GTFH, right? You remember Robert Compitello?
Yes.
May he rest in peace.
Loved Robert Compatello.
Yeah, Robert was great. He hired me as my first boss, and I knew I did not want to go into healthcare, and I did not want to go into PR. Those are two things I was like, "This aren't on my list," right? But I didn't really have that many job offers, and they did offer me the job, and I was hemming and hawing, because I really didn't want to do it. But Robert said, "Tell him that he's going to meet me in Vegas for a pet food trade show." And I was like, "Oh, all right, I'll meet him in Vegas for a pet food trade show." And that's what convinced me to go take that job. It was because like I've never been to Vegas, and it sounds like a fun thing. So, and then I met Robert, and of course he was great. So I stuck it out there for what, a couple years, but I really didn't want to do it. As I said, I didn't want to do PR. I certainly didn't want to be in healthcare PR back then. It was kind of it wasn't the cool thing to do. It wasn't the cool kids were doing. I wanted to be an advertising creative.
You know, even back then, I was going to say, Mike, even back then, like, being sort of an outsider looking in, and, I still remember some of those folks like Denise Connolly, now Denise Brashear, and Julie Meso, and all those folks, right? The one thing you guys all had in common were you were storytellers, right? Like, and that's what it kind of took back then. You had to, you know, in the 30 seconds or 1 minute you had to have a conversation with one of these editors or writers, you had to convince them that your story was compelling enough to be worth their while. And with you, I always had a feeling like there was always this sort of creative streak in you that was a little bit different than everybody else's, right? Like when you picture PR back then, or even probably now, right? Like there's a certain PR sort of vision you have in your brain of what these people are going to be like. Well, people think PR is mostly, they think it's all like these big social events with cocktails and, they think it's a version of Mad Men, right? You always struck me as a little bit more as the creative type. That aspect of it really shined out for you. And that's what led you to the next stage, right?
I guess so. I think you nailed it when you said storytelling, and all of us are storytellers in our own way. Those of us who, really love storytelling tend to use it no matter what you do for a living, right? I mean, salespeople, obviously, you're a sales guy. You tell stories all the time. But storytelling for brands is a completely different ball of wax, right? You're actually a shepherd of what they've already created rather than building it from scratch. Sometimes you're building it from scratch. I've done that, right? But for most of the part, I mean, if you go working on Pepsi, you're not building Pepsi's brand from scratch. You're shepherding what that brand already, the world that it's already created. You know, and telling stories is just a really great way to find new ways to be relevant, and that's the end of the at the end of the day, that's what matters is being relevant. If you're not relevant, people don't really care. They don't care about you anyway. Let's be honest. Everybody cares about themselves. Doesn't mean everybody's selfish. They have their own thoughts. It's like this brain occupies only so much space, and believe me, your brand ain't in it. Even if they love your brand, they can be brand loyalists. Doesn't mean that they're thinking about you almost ever, right?
So you go from PR, just looking over your LinkedIn profile, your resume, so to speak. It's been who's who of different agencies that you went to in the ad world. Like, how does that work? Like, I know with PR, it's a grind. There's crazy hours. There's a lot going on there. Tell us about that ad world, especially, for somebody who, always sort of had it in them that's what they wanted to do, but you knew you had to sort of pay your dues a little bit. How did that work, stepping your way through that?
Well, it's the same thing I tell everybody who's asking me, like, how do you get into the business and all that? It's tenacity, right? It's pig-headed stubbornness, really. Talent is cost adventure, right? But I've seen plenty of talented people not make it or get burned out or burn bridges. You know, they're just not cut out for the business side of this because it is a business. If you really want to be an artist, by all means, then you're only answering to yourself and your your patrons, I guess, or those who are your fans, right? In this case, somebody's writing a check. So, it's a little bit different. So you have to persevere, obviously, and you have to find your people and find those who are going to help you out. I've never done anything in this business without a relationship, without somebody, either that get to know, get recommendation from. The people that you work with when you're 25 are going to be there when you're 45, hopefully.
Mhm.
People that you worked for hopefully will recommend you, and the people that you work with, maybe your bosses or partners. You can't burn any bridges in any business, frankly, but in this one in particular, advertising in New York, it sounds big. It's a tiny village, and if you stick around long enough, 30 years like I have, you eventually know everybody because, people fall off. They don't come in at 50 years old. So if you're here at 50, 55, 56, it's because you've been around the same people, bouncing around the same 10, 12, 15 agencies. You all end up, knowing maybe not the same time, but like the same group of colleagues. So it's really, really important to keep those relationships alive. And like I said, the talent only gets you in the door, but to stay there for all these years, it requires so many other skills that have nothing to do with the creative part of it, right? That's the real business side of it.
It's funny because, I'm a salesperson. You are, on paper, it probably doesn't say the word salesperson, but you, in your business, in your world, right? Like you said, there's a business end of things, and these ideas that you sketch in your brain, you have to pitch them to people, right? And
I mean, first you pitch to yourself. You start with a blank piece of paper and you're pitching your own ideas to yourself. Then, if early on in your career, you probably have a partner. I had an art director partner starting out and all the way through up until starting Tiny, really. You have to pitch them, convince them, right? Then the two of you are going to go pitch whoever's right above you. And maybe that's 2 or 3 layers above you. So you're selling up and up and up. And then
right,
hopefully you get into the room with the client and you sell them. And then you're not done, right? Because, okay, they say go. Now you have to produce the thing. Well, you got to go explain it, which is selling it to production companies, find a director, on and on and on until eventually you're pressing the button to hit sell to the consumer, right? When they're seeing it. So, yeah, I think you're constantly convincing people to do something they don't want to do. That's sales, right? That's sales. I think a buddy of mine who's a sales guy back in the day told me that he goes, my job is basically to convince you to do something you absolutely don't want to do, but I'm going to convince you to do it anyway. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, but it's good for you. I'm going to point out what's good for you, and then you're going to buy it, but you don't want it. You don't walk, like I said before, nobody's thinking about the thing until they need it, right?
yeah, yeah.
So a salesperson is trying to remind you of your needs, right? And then I'll be here when you're ready, right? That's good sales.
And I would, my guess is, and I don't have to guess very far, but like this is not for the faint of heart, right? Like, so you have that blank sheet of paper, you have an idea for everything from, tuna fish to electronics to whatever whatever it is.
I worked on tuna. Yeah, that's a
You
good
have
one,
to
though.
be so, you have to be so in tune with yourself and comfortable with who you are to be able to talk yourself into that it's a good idea, to then, like you just climb that ladder of pitches, there's at least 6 to 10 different rungs you have to climb in order for somebody to actually write a check to support it. Every step of the way, somebody could be like, what the fuck is Rovner talking about? Like, what was that, right? Like, you have to be able to take the lumps with that too, because my guess is over 30 years, you've been told no a few times.
Oh, most of them. I mean, it's amazing when something does get produced, just because of all the layers and all the opinions. It's a team sport, right? Like, there's no such thing as like the lone genius. People think there is, but there's just not. And but no one person is going to make the best thing. Even when you have the idea yourself, it lives beyond you once you say it, once it goes out there, right? Especially if you're producing something, you have all sorts of people involved. Even now, when you can just press a button on AI, it still goes through humans to make sure that it relates to humans, right?
I was going to ask you that. That's a really great segue. This AI thing that we're talking about now, this new world of ours, and there is not a literally not a, this might 60th episode of my podcast, and I don't remember an episode where we didn't talk about AI in some way, shape, or fashion.
Right.
Some people are firm believers that this is the biggest thing that's ever going to happen to mankind. Others are like, I want to get as far away from this as possible, but I know it's affecting my life. What about your world? Like your world, more than most, right? Like right now, everybody's got ChatGPT open in a window on their computer, and they're like, "Make me an image of this. I have an idea about this, and what about that? Or here's every ad that's been compiled about that tuna fish that I was talking about. Throw it into ChatGPT. What can I talk about next? Like, how do you guys? Like, is that part of your game? Do you filter and run things through ChatGPT, or is it like a big no-no? Like, the people that are going to agencies, do they look at that like, I can do that myself type shit?
Well, that's the no-no, right? The no-no is to assume that it's going to replace us, the human mind, spirit, feelings, all that stuff. It's a tool. It's a great tool, sometimes I call it Google on crack, Photoshop on crack, depending on what you're using, whether it's whether it's an LLM or an image generator or video generator. They all have different things that they do, but ultimately they're pulling from what exists in the world, right? It's the world's largest encyclopedia and maker of things, but it is just a tool. It's a very exciting tool. We use it all the time, and we use it for, myriad ways, right? Research, sure. To test ideas, to show a client idea, to produce a thing. Especially if you're talking about social media content. We worked on a campaign. We're working on a campaign right now for the AMP Awards, which is the Association of Music Producers. Do it for them. This is now the second year in a row. It's pro bono for us because we like to do great work and we like these guys, and it's an industry thing. It's the only award show in advertising devoted to sound and audio in marketing media, right? So we created a character that's going to be the spokesperson, a mascot, right? They have no money. We created a character using AI that's called Boomer, and he's basically a guy who is really into the 80s. He wears a tracksuit and he has a boombox for a head. Okay, that's the idea. They bought into the idea, but we could either make that practically, literally make one, right, and get a costume and all that stuff, or just start by doing an AI. And these guys have zero budget. So, we have some credits, we can use AI to invent this guy, and then we can create an Instagram account for him, and then we can create posts, right? And that was super useful because with no money and a great idea, and creative willingness, we could crank out creative posts for them. And we did. Eventually we did, though, create the prop. I do have a boombox head. It's actually over there. I'd go get it, but it's a little unwieldy. So we're actually going to bring it to real life. But the AI part of it made it, it made it real for us, even though it wasn't real. And then we made it real. So you can see how you use it in that regard. But it's never going to replace taste, judgment, human insight. The danger is it's not that AI is going to come up with the ideas, is that humans are going to settle for what it gives you. You know what I mean? And just go, well, I've used AI. And I'm like, yeah, first rule of AI is always double check, always. And I don't know how often you use it, but you catch it virtually on every answer. You can be like, I don't think that's true. And like, totally right, man. Well, yeah, but you said it like it was. Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
you said it like it was law. And then I just point out, you actually don't know what the fuck you're talking about. And it's like, I absolutely not. Thank you for pointing that out, Mike. I'm like,
so
what good are you? So I also liken it to like a junior creative in my world, right? So I can give it a brief, right? And it can spit out 50 headlines, but it don't know what's good. I do, like the creative director does to the junior creative. No offense, junior creatives. A lot of you do know. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you use it that way, I think it's an incredibly exciting, useful tool. It speeds things up. Perfect for an agency of our size. We one of our phrases is move fast and make things. And it helps us a lot to be able to move fast and make things when we've got that. And I don't mean necessarily, as I said before, the end thing. Like, we have yet to produce a full-on commercial. I just saw that Val Kilmer is going to be, completely resurrected in a feature film using AI. And we ain't doing that yet, nor do I think I want to. But there are some things we can do with it. Like, even as a tool in post-production, so you don't think about, everyone's thinking like, I could produce something in AI. Well, yeah, you can also use it as a tool in post-production, where we just added a touch of it to make, let's say, a character is wearing a mask that the mouth couldn't move. We used AI to make the mouth move. Well, okay. Is it AI or is it using CGI? Like what? We're really splitting hairs there, aren't we? Like, what's the difference between AI and CGI is that you're typing words in as opposed to using the keys that you know how to use as a programmer. It's to me, it's like, who cares? It's still a human being asking a machine to do something for you because you have a human need at the end of it. So don't rely on the machine to do it for you. Use it as a tool. And I think it's very, very
Point well taken too. Like, the tool is only as good as the person that's using it, right? So if you were just to, put a bunch of bullshit into a chat GPT or AI and try to transition it, it would come out that way too. I've seen that image that you guys created. It's amazing. And I wanted to jump a little bit into Tiny, the agency. But first I wanted to ask you about one of the other hats you are wearing is you are an educator, right? You're teaching folks about what we're talking about right here, your world, right? These kids, so to speak, that are coming into this world, in this new world of advertising, which is vastly different than the world you grew up in, but the outcome is the same, right? Like what their dream is if they can take your 30 years of knowledge from your brain and implant it somehow, which I'm sure in 10 years they'll be able to do, into their brain, that's where they want to be, right? So tell me about how that works. Like, do you share, maybe you could share with us too, like what are some things you had worked on in the past that you share with them that was, the outcome wasn't what you had hoped. It was disastrous. And then maybe something that really worked well, that went it blew up much more than you thought it was going to be and did well for the client.
Well, it seems like different questions there. We can start off with the teaching thing, right? So let me address that first. I always wanted to do it for a couple of reasons. Two, actually. One is, gratitude, really. Like it's me taking classes at night at SVA with Rob Slosberg, who is creative director at DeVito Verity, still is, by the way. That it changed my life in so many ways. So that's the gratitude part. I just genuinely want to give back. And it feels good. It feels good to know what I didn't know then, and now I can share it, right? Then the other part's frustration. So it's like gratitude and frustration. The frustration part is like people are coming out of school or not even going to school for it. And it's just the craft isn't there, or they don't know what an idea is. They think an execution is an idea. That is the number one most common thing we run into is somebody goes, I have a great idea. And then they show me an ad. I'm like, that's not an idea. That's your execution of an idea. What's the idea that led you to that ad? Right? Well, it's the ad right here. You can see it. I'm like, no, that's a headline with some art on it. I get it. That is the execution of said idea. But the idea is much bigger. The idea has to be something that can, I don't know, give birth to many, many ads and not just print. It could be print TV. It could be a stunt. It could be, I don't know, a cologne, right? So that's kind of the reason why I got into it. And I think that it's the thing that we teach the most is idea generation, right? Just pure, how do you invent from nothing? And it seems like the most daunting task in the world, but we've been teaching now over about 6 years, 3 semesters a year. So 3 classes a year. That's a lot. And then we started to, I say we because I teach with my business partner, Michael Stupek. Then we started teaching at grad school at City College, New York, the big program. We teach the same thing over and over and over again. And it's still enlightening to them when they haven't heard it, which is, every idea starts with an insight. It's not new news to those of us who do this for a living, but to them it is, right? So that's the big mistake they make. Is that like, I have an idea. I'm like, you don't have an idea unless it came from a human truth first. So who am I talking to? What do they care about? All that stuff comes in the brief, right? That doesn't give you the idea. Is the truth about the world gives you the idea. It's we liken it to the setup of a stand-up comedian's joke, right? That's your insight, right? You're like, how come I can't ever find that other sock? Okay, that's an insight. You're like, it's true. Like, for whatever fucking reason, every time I pull my clothes out of the dryer, there's one sock missing. Everyone goes, yup, that's an insight, right? The execution might be Jerry Seinfeld. I think he was like, I think they're trying to escape. Use a static cling, it's hanging onto the back. There you go. That's your idea, right? It's kind of, if you don't go through that process, then you're never going to really know if you stumbled on something. Then you ask another question. Let me see. I can give you that example as more general. When my older partner, Soren Younger, and I were running the Pepsi social business at Vayner, we had the keys to their, basically back then Twitter was everything. So we had the keys to Twitter and their Facebook and all their social channels with no real responsibility other than, keep them relevant, right? And lots of engagement. It wasn't about sales, they got it. So we would do everything from, what do we have for this morning for an idea for a tweet? What happened in the news? Let's just say something from the Pepsi point of view. Okay. So that's from that small, right? Where you're not really thinking about it. And that's kind of the Vayner way. Just get it out. Like, don't be precious. But it's also a big account, and we had a team. So we would think about, what are we doing today? What are we doing this week? And what are we doing over the month? And do we have any ideas that are going to be like a 6-month lead time thing? And more often than not, the more we plan, the more we were like, all right, what are we doing next month? What's our regular blah, blah, blah? That always failed. Like we'd hire an animator to do lo-fi videos because lo-fi was really hot back then. And we'd replicate the whole lo-fi thing, write original songs, okay? Have it animated to it. And it was great. We'd post it up there and you get a little bit of engagement. And then one of our writers would just fucking write a funny tweet in the morning and it would blow its socks off, That's what you're like, the more you plan sometimes, you can't be too precious. That's one lesson I learned from that. But then there are things where you don't think it's going to hit at all. And it's just, like I said, it's almost the same story, like a single sentence tweet that just makes people go, oh my God, that's so damn funny. And they share it like crazy. So you just have to be open to what people are looking for. It's not about you. I keep going back to that, right? Nobody cares about you. They certainly don't care about what you're selling them. They only care about their own needs, their families, their hungers, their desires. So you have to bridge that gap for them. You have to go, no, actually, this is what you care about. See?
Yeah. And like you said, like that, the analogy with the comedian's perfect because like the ones that hit the most, the ones that are the funniest, the ones that you tell your friends like, yo, did you hear this? And you repeat it are the ones that are unique, right? The ones that you feel like you know exactly what they're talking about. You've been in that position. You've done exactly what they're saying. So once you tie that aspect in it and make it your own, that's the difference.
Well, if you think about at its broadest, you say you're doing a national TV commercial, right? You're literally talking to millions and millions of people, but you're not. You're talking to one person. You're talking to the person you're trying to convince to buy the thing or, to sign up for your service. It has to feel like, wait, they're talking to me, right? I'm talking to 20 million of you, but yeah, you, Mike, you too. Part of it.
Side hustles, right? So you've had your share of things you've done in between stints and stuff. I remember the Dr. Priestley.
Yeah. Dr. Priestley's fizzy water.
Tell me about that because I remember, I don't know if you remember, but you and I had met a couple of years ago. We either had lunch or a drink. I forget what we were meeting, and you were telling me.
We were talking about fulfillment, actually. You're talking about storage and shipping of this stuff.
That's right.
So I started with a partner. It was actually his idea. He had it already patented, but he didn't do anything other than get the patent. And he had a patent for the name Dr. Priestley's Fizzy Water. And I was intrigued because my family basically hydrates itself off of seltzer, right? We like bubbles in our water. So I was like, okay, well, explain, say more. And he explained to me that Joseph Priestley in 1767 accidentally discovered carbonation. I'm like, oh, that's fucking cool. I love a story, and a brand needs a story, right? Otherwise, it's not a brand. It's just another product with a logo slapped on it. But there was a reason. And as soon as I heard the reason, I was like, yes. And I was like, what'd you do with it? And he showed me his first designs, and it was so wrong. And it was like, he's like, why is it wrong? I'm like, well, you explained to me the man was 1767, right? And you're showing me a picture of a guy in a top hat with a curly mustache. I'm like, I think you're about 100 years off. Like the guy should be having a 3-point hat. And, he came from England in the 1790s. He was basically an American patriot who was, hanging out with
opening a Cheers
Jefferson
or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was like, okay, big guy, you want to do it with me? And I was like, oh, that's kind of what I do, And at the time I was working in a small agency that handled a lot of beverage alcohol, right? So I kind of had it in my head, like there is a need, there's a white space. Why does the world need another seltzer? It didn't. LaCroix was killing it, right? LaCroix. Well, we determined that nobody at the time was making any kind of curated flavors for the world of mixology, right? Because I don't know what the percentage is, but a very large percentage of cocktails use bubbly water, right? And a lot of them have certain favorite profiles. Cucumber and mint tend to go a lot together in cocktails. So we made a cucumber and mint one, right? We made a rosemary grapefruit. So we were trying to combine both an herb and a fruit flavor because it was making it more sophisticated and it was making easy for bartenders to go, wait, that's so much easier. I can just and do that. That was the plan. But as any entrepreneur will tell
Best
you,
laid plans,
yeah,
right?
best laid plans. So that was the plan. But then the only person that we could find to help us, co-pack it, to make it for us, they said you can have 12-ounce cans. And I'm like, well, 12-ounce cans is not going to do what I want it to do in a bar. You can't. You're rarely pouring 12 ounces of a seltzer into a cocktail. So now you have a half a can. You waste. I'm like, that's okay. Well, we have to zig. Now we're just making sophisticated flavors, and we stayed with the flavors and all that, and we just stuck with the Dr. Priestley's thing. So be it. That's not why it failed. It failed. Well, a couple reasons. One, two guys who had day jobs that had nothing to do with that. We learned as we went. Distribution's everything, right? It was because of COVID, really. We were doing okay. We managed to find a way to sell through Amazon, which also was not easy, but we did. And we were selling 50 states. Troops abroad were buying it, right? So the brand was building, and we had a lot of serious fans. People loved it. We weren't making any money through Amazon because they take all your damn money, especially if you're shipping a heavy product like liquid. They just no way around it. They take it all for shipping. But whatever. We were building a brand. It was going great, making just enough profit to not lose money. So we're like, one day we'll get into stores. And we're physically walking through New York City with cases under our arms into Brooklyn Fair, being like, would you take it? And they would take 20 cases. I'm like, great. We have to repeat that, right? All over America. You guys, it just wasn't going to happen. Then COVID hit, and we were stuck with all those cases sitting in a warehouse in Jersey, and couldn't get rid of them. Nobody, there was nothing we could do. So we donated it all we closed the company and donated the rest of the cases to Ukraine. And that was it. Some guy came with a big truck. They told us they shipped it to Ukraine. We were like, I believe you. So that was that.
Great idea. And the education that you got from that, right?
Well, that's what it is. It makes me a much better advertising guy, right? It makes me a much better client partner because, man, do I know their pain. And, in our job right now, we pretty much have one lane to swim in, which is to solve their problems with some sort of creativity, right? But it is not to figure out logistics, shipping, packaging, manufacturing, EBITDA, all sorts of things. And I never had to worry about, but now I feel a client's pain because every decision you make has incredible consequences, right? So say you want to be bold and you want to make a change. You're like, wait a minute, that change could cost me $40,000 just in cans. Everything has a ripple effect. So me as a creative now, I understand when I suggest something that isn't what they're used to, it has a consequence. And to hear no, there's probably a really good reason why no, and to understand it. And sometimes I can convince them yes, because I get why there was a no, right? I totally understand. Distribution's hard, but here's how you get around it. Oh, okay. Thanks, Mike. And then, okay. Yeah, I see you.
So you find these guys that you enjoy working with, and you guys create your own tiny ad agency. Let's talk about that. You were kind enough pre-interview to send me. I didn't realize you do a podcast too. This really cool podcast is based at. Is it called Three Questions?
Three Tiny Questions.
Three Tiny Questions.
Where each of us asks one question each of our guests, and somehow that takes up an hour.
There's a bunch of online that I went through, and they are not only entertaining and appealing, but educational too. And leave it to you guys, and tell me a little bit about your partners. But each one of you have, you're talking to the same person, but you have different angles. I don't know if it was pre-planned each time. You guys are just like, everybody come up with one question and we'll just wing it. But it seems like a very planned accidental thing where again that being unique and people hear it and are sort of connecting with it right away. Tell us about Tiny.
Okay, let's show two different things again. So Tiny, the agency, we started about 3 years ago, actually before the glut of the holding company mergers or swallowings of all of them into one. I mean, there was always holding companies buying things up, but it wasn't like this, where there's, you know, it's sandwiched all together, which is working out great for Tony, by the way. We had been the three of us together, Michael Stupak, who's a account guy, and Tom Chrisman, creative, and I had been in all the big shops. We had collectively run probably everything that there's to run, you know, every category at least. But we were never really owners of anything other than our own destinies. And we found ourselves towards the end of our careers, the traditional advertising careers, that we were often asked for, you know, our intellectual property beyond our thoughts, which mean like our relationships, right? So if you work at an agency and you're a VP above, you might have a meeting every week where they go, all right, it's time to help out the cause and help us drum up new business. Who do you know? And that dawned on me that, like, well, shit, I must know somebody if they're asking me that, right? And then you think about it, you're like, I do know a fucking lot of people. I've been doing this a long time. But then, you know, as with everything in advertising, nothing good can last, at least not in big agency life. And I got laid off. As I've never been fired in my life, but I've never stayed in a job more than, you know, like the longest has been like 8-10 years, and it's never my choice. And, you know, I think we were all fed up with that. And going back into it, find the next big job, bigger, better. Who cares? I don't care if it's CCO at, you know, the biggest agency. It's just, you're still suffering the same fate unless they make you a partner. But even then, good luck. There's a board above you. And, you know, Greg Hahn started mischief because he got kicked out, right? Which is insane to me. And I think we just said never again. You know, we just kind of looked at each other and said never again. And we are having the time of our lives. Have we made as much money as we used to make the year before we started the agency? Not yet. But we're seeing 35% year-over-year growth, which, from what I understand in business, that's pretty good. And like I said, we're having the time of our lives because we only answer to each other and our clients. And unlike a big agency, we really don't have much overhead at all. I mean, we have some subscriptions, of course, you know, some club memberships, things like that. We pay for in the agency news subscriptions, campaign US subscriptions, things like that. The rest of the money goes right into the work. It's either right here or in the production. And the clients know it. We're absolutely transparent about it up front, and they can see it. I mean, listen, did I like working in an agency that had 3 floors overlooking a park with the 2 full-time baristas and a speakeasy built in? Yeah, it was nice. But somebody had to pay for that.
Yeah.
That's all built in to every estimate, every scope, and it clearly is not with us. I mean, you know, you could say, well, you're taking all the money. I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing your work. So yeah, me taking it is not the same as me paying for a person to sit next to me that has nothing to do with your business, from reception to, and like, no shade, but that is the honest truth of why we can do what we do that big agencies can't do. And when it comes to the work itself, it's always the same tiny team anyway. It was always me, Tom, and Mike, or the likes of us, a trio or 4 or 5 or 6 people that are assigned the thing anyway. What makes it a big agency is that there's 50 of those little cells, right? So we just remove it and go, well, we're the same cell. And unlike an agency, and this is not unique to us, it's unique to the us's versus the thems. So the murder hordes of the world, the misses of the world, like, you know, we are able to staff accordingly and only for those things. So if we get, let's say, a piece of business on a sports account, we can tap into the 3, 4, 5 creative directors, strategists, and producers that we know that love it, that don't just have the experience, but want to do it.
Yeah.
And we already have the money set aside because the client gave us the scope of work. And then we hand to them, we hand some to us. The agency takes 20% off the top. And that's it. That's where the money is going. And maybe it's stupid, but you know what it does to us is we're not building Tiny as a brand. I mean, we are, right? We are by our reputation. We do our little LinkedIn thing that keeps people entertained, but that's it. The rest of it, it ain't going into an office. It's not going into the barista, and it's not going into, you know, even swag. You know, like even once a year, we'll have a holiday party and I'll make some t-shirts. But even then we're like, it's not about, you know, it's like, that's fun and people like it and they want some stuff from us and all that. But it is not about building Tiny. We're building, I don't know, my clients' brands, American Century, you know, investments. That's what I'm building. The AMP Awards. That's what we're doing. So, and I don't understand how other agencies get away or have been getting away with it all this time, which is it's so me.
Yeah.
You know, walk in, look at my conference room, it overlooks the river. I'm like, that's great for you. but I thought we were here to talk about my brand. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You want a cappuccino?
I think you hit it right on the head too, Mike. Like, especially in today's world, right? Like, I think those days maybe sadly are coming to an end, right? Where people would have, they'd work with this giant conglomerate and they would be buried with paperwork and different levels of, okay, we handle the creative. No, when you get to the design aspect, I hand you over to this group, whatever. Having an agency of your ilk with the experience that you have that is able to pivot on a dime, right? There doesn't have to be like 15 meetings around why we're going to pivot, or you don't like this, let us get back to you in 3 weeks with some, I have to draw up I have to find this. There's none of that, right? It kind of, the fog of what was advertising, the fog of what people sort of wanted to eliminate seems to be lifting. And the agencies like you guys are coming through in flying colors.
Well, I imagine that clients are demanding it more. Oh, hi, kitty. Demanding it more and more, as they should. I mean, we just said it, right? Like there's so much bloat. There's so much obvious themness to the relationship. And we're not in it for that. And we never were,
Yeah.
like we were always in this for the work and but one of our motto at Tiny is make great work for great people and have a great time doing it. And that's like, we've struggled really, like, what are we, what makes us do, what's our philosophy? And it really drove me nuts. And it drove Michael nuts it was driving me nuts to come up with like, what is our TM? What is our circle R that we do? And I'm like, it's such bullshit. Every agency says that we have a method, and they trademark the thing and they say it's like scientific. And I'm like, no, it's you come up with an insight, you have an idea, and then you express it. I mean, it's always been the same. So we did have to find something though to define us. We have to have a vision. We have to be able to tell people what it was. And it boiled down to, we want to be a great hang. So it's all these different things, right? But when we said make great work, check, for great people, no assholes, right? No toxic environments. If I find that this is difficult, if I'm not having fun, I own the place. I already don't have your money. So keep it. And I'm out of here. So that's the second part of it. And have a great time doing it. I mean, what the hell are we talking about here? It's advertising. Like I got into this business so I could go, what about a dragon? Yeah, that sounds cool. I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah, man.
So great. Great work, great people, great time. And that's the Tiny way. And we also have 3 partners. So all it takes is one person to say something and another person to say, go ahead. And the third person is outvoted. So that's how we're able to move incredibly fast.
Yeah, that's
We
great.
just hired one of our former students, Josh Plasko. He's kind of a social media wonderkid. And he's helping us out, a couple of days a week. Right. Because he knows that all he has to do is send us a text. And he's like, can I get a thumbs up? Can I get another thumbs up?
Yes.
And it goes up.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't compete with that kind of speed. I think that we are at a distinct advantage when it comes to anybody who's slightly even larger than we are, frankly, because making decisions is the toughest thing. And like you said, we don't have meetings to have a meeting. Sure.
Yeah.
We have a meeting to talk about what's about to come up just between us. We status every single morning. So we do have meetings every day, but we don't literally go, all right, why are you in this meeting? Who's in this? Yeah, where's Dave? Like, what are we talking about? Like, just do the work, do what's absolutely required to get the job done, and then over deliver. And the only way you're going to over deliver is by consistently doing the work. And if you're in a meeting, if you're talking about the meeting that you should have had and you're having a post-mortem to the meeting, or if you're doing something that's unrelated, off-sites, I mean, like, sure. Do we go to award shows? Do we go to conferences? Yeah, we need to be seen and we need to be part of the community. But man, the only way to truly over-deliver is to do what we do, which is just hunker down and crank. And you can't do that with all this bullshit around you, all these processes and paperwork and approvals. And I don't know how people move. I don't know how anything gets done.
Great point. Again, with this sort of world that we've created here, the world of advertising and PR and communication and influencer marketing sort of is all kind of like working together, right? Back in the day, they were very separate. Now they're almost like working in cohesion with one another. I wanted to get your quick take on our world, which is influencer marketing, right? Doing this sort of fulfillment and distribution around these very specific creative outreaches that people are sending to these creators and influencers, trying to get them to, post something on TikTok. And with social selling now being the rage with, Meta platforms and TikTok Shop and all this other stuff. Where do you see that going? Like it sort of came out of nowhere, right? It started before COVID, but really blew up with COVID, and now it's just got a life of its own. How do you see that unfolding? Like, do you think that's a plus? Do you think that's sort of, is it something that's going to sort of go away, or what's your
No,
take?
it's not going away any, sooner than, well, let's put it this way. Michael Jordan's an influencer, right? I mean, like, there's no Nike without his influence, if
Right.
you will. So it's this notion of like, I'm going to listen to somebody because I trust them. Okay. So that influence has always been around. This now, because people can look into their phone and talk to millions and millions. Yeah, sure. Did it change that a little bit? Democratize that a bit? Sure. But here's the dirty little secret about it. And without media, without putting money, a brand putting money behind the influencer, no one's going to see it anyway. And this is something we learned by actually working in this field and working with media company that knows this very, very well. You could have 20 million followers, okay? Without it being boosted, just organically, somebody posted 20 million followers. 20 million followers. She mentioned my thing. Oh my God. Literally, Savannah Guthrie was friends with one of my business partner on Dr. Priestley's Fizzy Water, and she took one of the first cans ever and posted it on our Instagram, and we were like, holy shit, but we had no sales. It didn't do anything, nor did we need it, because only a certain 2% of our followers will see it, right? That's just the algorithm and all that stuff. So it doesn't matter how influential an influencer is. It matters how you support it. So you could literally have no followers, none, 2 followers, Mike, but you're a great storyteller. And I want you because, geez, there's nobody does this with this brand the way this guy does. But I'm going to put $50,000 behind his fucking posts, and now he's an influencer. The influence comes from your ability to relate to me. It's not because you're a phenomenon on social media, because you have followers. That's the point I'm trying to make. Followers don't mean Shinola. Sure, it does for your own fame and all that stuff. Yeah. But for the brand, don't chase the follows. Do not chase the follows. Chase the person, chase the influencer, chase their content, chase what they bring to the table, their storytelling ability. But, I don't care if they have 2 followers or 2 million, really, honestly. Not for us.
Everybody who's watching this now knows why, when I was thinking about people to bring on this podcast, I insisted on Mike Rovner. Had to twist his arm a little bit, but I appreciate you coming on, Mike. It's been wonderful. If somebody's watching this and they want to get in touch with you or they want to work with Tiny, how do they reach out to you?
Well, you can reach out to, look at tinyadagency.com, spelled exactly like it sounds, tinyadagency.com. We are revamping the website. It should be done shortly. Right now it looks like poop, but it's going to be amazing with all of our new work on there and everything. And that's the easiest way to find out about us. Or follow us on LinkedIn. That's where we're most active, honestly. We have the most fun there. And you'll find out anything we're doing there because we love talking about ourselves in a way that's relevant to you.
All right, Mike Rovner, it's been a pleasure. You're the best. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike Ryan. Take care, buddy.